Hello, everybody. It's afternoon here in West Palm, Florida. This is Mimi, and I have with me Erica Bonham. And where are you at, Erica?
I'm in Colorado, so it is also afternoon. It's 1 o'clock here. Yeah.
And how's your weather?
It's actually really lovely out. It's like mid 60s and
Oh, yeah. We've
yeah.
been getting 90s. It's like heat wave
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Florida is no joke.
But May usually is not this hot. So we're
Yeah.
hoping that we're getting the heat in the beginning.
Yeah, maybe.
As long as your air conditioner is working, that's the thing
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
Florida. So today we're going to talk about healing and healing from trauma, abuse, or whatever you need to heal from. And Erica's been on the show before, and she's very, very popular. And
Well, I'm delighted to be back.
yeah,
Maybe. Thank
that's
you.
good. And she's passionate about walking with clients through their messy but beautiful process of healing and remembering their true nature. And I have a minister that always says, you just, if you want to just ugly cry, you come ugly cry on my shoulder. I don't care if you get snot on your neck. He's so funny. But that's the type of person you are. You will take all of it and be there for them and help them get back to their true nature. And it's that they're always, ready. They just don't know it. And they're always enough. They just don't know it. That's what I think, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, does that about cover my description of you?
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds all right. I'll live with that one for
You'll live with that one.
sure.
What's your actual like title?
Sure,
Is
sure. Yeah, I'm a licensed professional counselor.
there
That's
you go.
what my license is. Yeah,
That's what I thought. And that'll be in the notes. And you do have a website, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
it's
just
awesome.
my practice is called AVOS, AVOS. So it's just avoscounseling.com.
We'll have
That
all
stands
that in
for
the show notes in case anybody
yeah.
wants to get in touch
Yep.
with you.
Yeah.
So let's start a conversation. I've been hearing and working on a book and doing a lot of I actually started another podcast called Soul Realignment.
I love that.
Yeah, and I'm doing it with a co host, which
Cool.
is great because she is a coach, which is a spiritual guide coach. I don't know if you ever heard of the Akashic Records. Have you ever heard of
Uh-huh.
that?
Yep.
Oh,
I've
wonderful.
I've had those read and yeah, those are
Oh,
cool.
she's reading mine. So
Okay.
I had heard of them, but she came on and we talked about it. And I said, gee, why don't you read mine live? And
Oh
she said,
wow.
yeah. She said, you really want to do that? I said, yes. I said, you can't read she can't read my book because she doesn't want to know anything about me. It has to
Uh-huh.
be pure. And I said, yes, if you could read my book, you'd see that I keep no secrets. So we started, and I said, this has to be a podcast on its own. So we have 6 episodes,
Oh cool. I love that. That's
and we're
awesome.
still on
Check
me.
that out. Nice.
I'm finding out my prior lives, my spiritual guides, who they are, who we had to tell to leave.
hmm
Their job was done, but they liked me. They were just hanging around.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Okay. So,
I
what,
love
what
that.
do you think about spiritual trauma? Do you think spiritual trauma, and I'm talking about, I was raised Catholic and I had spiritual trauma from being a Catholic and being
Right.
told that I had to be a certain way. And if I wasn't a certain way, I was going to hell, you know, and I
Right.
could not live up to the standards because I got a
Right.
divorce. And I
Right.
got a divorce and they went, get out,
Right.
which devastated me. Um, so how does spiritual trauma impact our mental health?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's often interwoven with our community, with our family, with our whole social network. So if you are deciding or if you're realizing that whatever spiritual community you're in is no longer alive and spiritual trauma, if we're going to define it's very ambiguous. Now, most people would agree like sexual abuse from clergy members, right?
Mhm.
public shaming, public violence, like,
Yeah.
you know, things like that.
Cults. Cults that
Cults,
are
yes, but
based
it's
on,
even the definition of a cult is very
yeah.
subjective, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so, but like for me, I was raised in a pretty mainstream Lutheran church, but it was very anti-gay and very,
Yes.
you know, Lutherans are sort of Catholic adjacent,
We have a
and
lot of those.
yeah, and there's a lot of perfectionism woven into that, a lot of binary thinking. You're either good or bad, you're either right or wrong, you're either, righteous or sinful. And there's just this, like, a lot of binary thinking, and that to me was pretty traumatizing.
Yeah.
Because you're raised in this overall ethos that you are inherently bad, you are inherently sinful. And especially when you're a child, and if you're being told like you're going to burn in hell, children are very literal, and they literally picture that. They that
Yes.
feels very, very scary. And some
Yeah.
religious practitioners would say they should be scared. But for me, that
Mhm.
just does not feel aligned, and
Yeah.
it is experienced in my body as trauma. And so the definition of spiritual trauma is pretty subjective. Um, but it can impact our mental. It really bleeds into so many areas. A lot of women that I work with, for example, even if they're in healthy, monogamous, hetero
Yeah.
relationships or marriages, they still have tons of trauma and shame around sexuality, for example, right? It can impact your own ability to take care of yourself, right? A lot of religious messaging is like anything that you do to take care of yourself is selfish, and everything should be related to sacrifice and related to service. And it's not that we want to get rid of those ideas of sacrifice and service, but
Mhm.
if they're at the expense of your own well-being and your own health, then it might be out of balance, right?
Yes.
Spiritual trauma can impact even our just relationship with our bodies. A lot of religious messaging says that our bodies are sinful, that we shouldn't trust our bodies, and really our bodies are such sources for wisdom and
Mhm.
information. Even
Absolutely.
a non-Christian spiritual, like, I've seen a lot of yuck around yoga communities or Buddhist communities that's just like, positive vibes only, and only,
Yes. Yes.
that is pretty
That's
yucky
bullshit.
as well,
That's bullshit.
right?
My minister even calls that out. We started out, I've been there 21 years. He's been our minister for 12. He's gay.
Yeah.
The church is Unity of the Palm Beaches, and Unity is a very big church throughout the world. It was. But all the churches are falling apart, and people
Yeah.
aren't going to church, and they're closing down.
Right.
And so we have less people there, but we've noticed lately that they're younger. We're
Mm,
because we do not call it a church. We call it a spiritual community. And our website and everything else makes sure that everyone's welcome, you know.
yeah. Right.
And what I love about it is he says that. He goes, no, you don't put your unity face on and say peace and love and everything's wonderful. No, no, you have feelings. You talk about those feelings. That's how you get rid of those feelings or resolve
Right.
them.
Right.
But
Right.
that's what we're talking about. Now, the Catholic Church is a different story. You
Sure.
know, you go to catechism and then, you have all these rites and rituals, which I loved all those things. I loved the Catholic
Mhm.
Church and the what do I want to say, pomp and circumstance.
Sure. Yeah.
It was a
Totally.
show every Sunday. But when I would go to confession, and so real quick, I was 16 and I didn't have sex with the man, but I was being seduced by an older man. I worked at a part-time job. Handsome, very handsome man. He was married. He had children. So the
Mhm.
way he got me in his web, was he's going to teach me how to drive because I hadn't got my license. So after work, I would leave with him in his car to learn how to drive. And it
Mm-hmm.
became, no, that wasn't what it was. And
Right.
after a couple, I don't know how long it lasted, I can't remember, but he wanted me to run away with him and all this stuff. And now make sure you realize there was no sex, there was kissing, there was making
Mm-hmm.
out. He was probably 30 years old.
Yeah.
He was committing a crime.
Right. Right.
And I broke it off and I went to confession. And I told the priest. And instead of the priest saying anything that the guy did that was wrong, he said,
Yep.
well,
Exactly.
what would you think if you were the wife? How would you feel if you were the wife? Put yourself in her shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, I was the bad
Oh
person.
yeah. Yeah. And that is
16
so
years old.
common, right? That doc religious text. Again, I come from the Christian tradition, so that's what I know. But this happens across different faith backgrounds, right? But that, biblical scripture is really weaponized and used to
Mhm.
blame victims, to
Yeah,
say like, oh, if your husband is beating you, you just need to be a docile wife and be a better wife and stay with him and forgive him. I've heard so many stories about things like that, or public shaming about affairs, or public shaming about not being a good wife. Just things like that, or very sensitive
yeah.
information being used in a really horrific way. And exactly that was, you were really, he had way more power than you. He had way more age on you. That
Oh,
was really abuse,
yeah.
right? Right?
And it was, I don't know if he was grooming me to
Right.
really run away and then be, in this.
Traffic you or something. Yeah, who knows?
Well, I don't believe that. That I don't think that, but I do think that, and you know what? It doesn't matter. The
Yeah,
fact was he was 30 years old, he was married. He was
that's
wrong.
right. And
He was
that's right.
wrong.
That's right.
And
Yes.
maybe he really was in love with me,
And the
but he's
priest to
still
even say
wrong.
like, "Oh, honey, are you okay? Like, what is happening?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 19, a boy tried to rape me. And thank God I got away. That's in my first book. But my father insisted I call the police. And I said, I don't want to call the police because I was embarrassed and,
Right.
humiliated, even though I didn't do anything wrong, and devastated and traumatized. Oh, yes, he made me call the police. Well, there were two witnesses that, because when I screamed, they chased him, but they didn't catch him. And I knew his name, I knew who he was and everything else. But it went to grand jury. I had to tell the story. Now, again, I'm a young woman. I really don't want to go through this. That he
Right.
punched me in the face and that he threatened me with a
Right.
rock and told me he'd kill me. I mean, I don't want to go through that again. And then it didn't pass, it didn't go to trial.
Wow.
So years later, I run into him 10 years later in a
Wow.
shopping department store. And he walks up to me as if we're best friends and says, oh, hi. And I look at him and I say, don't you know who I am? Don't you remember me? And the light came on in his eyes because he had done this to so many women. He was known for it. And
Wow.
he never paid the price. And I said, I just have one question. How did you get away with it? And he said, it cost my parents a lot of money.
Ah,
I use that term, spirit gaslighting, and no one ever heard of it. Now everybody uses it.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you explain what gaslighting is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is important to recognize that gaslighting now is sort of thrown around, like almost misused. Like if you don't agree with somebody, you're gaslighting them, and that's not quite the
No, that's
definition,
not it.
right?
No.
We can disagree, but
Yeah.
it's really a manipulation tool. It's a
Yes.
toolbox. It's a tool in the toolbox of narcissistic abusers. And really,
Yes.
there are very strong parallels of narcissistic abuse and spiritual abuse. their
Yes.
their their handbooks are very adjacent, right? And so gaslighting is a tool where that it is very intentional, that you are manipulating somebody's view of reality for
Exactly.
your own gains,
Right.
that you are making them doubt their own reality, right? It's like literally saying, you know, I
That
saw
didn't
you or
happen.
you
Yeah.
hit me, and you're like, no, you're imagining it. And
Yeah.
if I did do that, you're too sensitive, or you probably deserved it, right? Or um it's literally making somebody doubt their own facts, their own five senses, and their own reality.
For a while. And then if you're smart, you or eventually talk to somebody about it and they tell you what's going on. But I have a person in my life that does it all the time. Right now, I'm distancing from her.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be something like she would get upset with me and get very angry and then say not talk to me for a month. And then a month will go by and she'd call and act like nothing ever happened and just start talking about everyday things. And I'd say, don't you need to say something to me first before you talk about your new clothes that you're getting? And she go, like what? Well,
Right,
when you were
right, right.
screaming at me a month ago in the middle of the mall,
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
what are you talking about?
Totally.
Never
Yeah.
happened. That's gaslighting.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I even, there's ways that even gratitude can be a gaslight, right? It's like if you're really going through something, and this is where it overlaps with spiritual abuse, is like if you're really through something, and you go to a clergy member, or you go to just a community member or a friend, and they say something like, well, everything happens for a reason, or God
Oh,
never gives you anything you can't handle, or just be grateful for what you have.
yeah.
That to me is a spiritual gaslight.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I get that
Right.
all the time because I have so
No,
many
no.
medical
And
problems.
any spiritual wisdom that is in those words has been watered down and made into this sort of psychological trope, and it doesn't really capture what is needed for something. Like, okay, let's take everything happens for a reason. Now, it's not to say that there isn't such a thing as post traumatic growth, or some
Yes.
sense of like, oh, I
You
went through
learn
this
something.
hard
Mhm.
thing and I learned something. But one, I believe that we are co-creating the meaning of that we have some say and some
Yes.
empowerment in that.
Yes.
And it is not without brutality and really digging into what it means to be human, and what it means to honor what we are going through at the time. And if you're just going to scoop around,
Yeah.
like a bypassing of like, well, everything happens for a reason. No, 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 no.
No.
That is really avoiding,
Yes.
minimizing, and gaslighting what
Yes.
that person's the brutality of the
Yeah.
present moment is. And
Yeah.
we can sort of hold this larger wisdom, maybe when we are really going through it, we can just hold a little bit of wisdom that maybe there are lessons and meaning that we can make down the road. But my invitation is not to try to figure those out, and to really just be in a place of compassion and attunement and love with the pain of the present moment.
Exactly. And and to tell the person, which I get this from my therapist and my minister, like I get triggered.
Of
I've been in
course.
counseling. Um, I have 33 years of sobriety this month. Oh,
Awesome.
34.
Congratulations. Yeah.
34. But because of that, that started my spiritual journey because rehab, the one I went to used the 12 and 12, which is very spiritual.
Yeah.
It's very God centered. And so I did that. And then I was only 9 months sober and I gained 50 pounds because
Right.
I still hadn't dealt with my core issues of why I drank. So
Right.
what did I do? I put down one substance and picked up another.
Yeah.
So I went to a place in California for 3 weeks to deal with food issues and why I was doing that. And they did all kinds of uh, very um, advanced therapy because that was 34 years ago. All right.
Mhm.
And it's stuff they do now that nobody even thinks about. But then it
Right.
was like, oh wow, that's innovative, you know.
Mhm.
Just something
Mhm.
like meditation, you know, and they
Right.
have
Right.
meditation and yoga and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. But okay, still did not get to the core. No.
Mhm.
5 years later, I went into deep depression. And I had been diagnosed in rehab with chronic depression, anxiety disorder, and that I was probably self medicating all the years that I drank.
Right.
And so now, even though I'm getting help, I'm still not getting to the core issues. So, Karen Foundation has a 5 day program, and they only take 5 people. Fabulous. And they do role playing family of origin,
Mhm.
because that's how far back you have to go. I had
Yeah.
to go back to 5 years old. You know,
Yeah.
I had, and the reason they only have 5 people is, and they are of different ages, which I didn't notice right away. They do a thing where that lady's going to be your mother, this man's going
Mhm.
to be your father, that girl's going to be you, and you're just going to observe. Okay. Wow, that was so impactful. It was.
Sure.
So let's go forward a few years. I moved to Florida and I hadn't had therapy or anything for years. And you know, on antidepressants, right? Um, and 2020 hit and a
Mhm.
Parkinson's stage 4 husband and breast cancer and a double
Yeah.
mastectomy and
Yeah.
complications and an autoimmune disease got identified. So we had to make the decision not to leave the house for 9 months, which, if
Mhm.
you remember, nobody knew exactly how you got it.
Right. Right. Right.
So we had to do that. So my depression was awful. So I went back into therapy. Now that's 5 years. I'm still in therapy. I go every 2 weeks on Zoom because we just got comfortable doing Zoom, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm still working, but I bring it up because I still get triggered. Now, the happy people, it happens for a reason, whatever, they would say something like, oh, you shouldn't be getting triggered by that. That happened 30 years ago. Or
Right.
why are you getting, that was nothing. That was nothing
Right.
that happened. No, it's somebody said or did something, and I felt the pit of my stomach pain or whatever. I'm triggered for a reason.
Right.
And you know about chakras and all that stuff
Yep.
in different places in the body. And where I feel my pain is always in the gut.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
my minister told me, he said, no, when you get triggered, don't try to get rid of it. Sit down, embrace it, think
Yep.
about it. Think, why was I triggered? What did they say? What did it bring up for me? See, that's the way. And that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even invite you probably doing this, but I just want to name this for your audience
Please.
is not just thinking, but really offering an open heart, right? Offering a
Yes.
compassionate, attuned energy. So not
Compassion
just
yourself.
saying the right words, not just thinking about it, but to
Mm,
say, "Oh, okay, here is this pain. And can I just offer like the same kind of energy that you would your grandchildren, or if you're not, or you know, your own children, or just or a pet, right? Like that
yeah,
if you
for
had a
baby. Yeah.
if you had a scared little puppy at your door,
Uh-huh.
how what kind of energy would you approach that scared
Yeah.
little puppy with?
Yeah.
And can you not just the words and not just thinking, but that resonance, that reverence for it, that like, hey, I see you. It's okay for you to be here. I love you. And let's be curious about what is the root of this. Is there an old story that I'm attaching to this? You know,
Mhm.
and you know, I think I'm a both and girl. And I think we talked a little bit about this
Yeah,
the
we did.
last time, right? But that like we do have to be mindful of our perceptions of things. You know, I have an acquaintance, and it's like she looks for reasons to be hurt, right? She's looking for evidence,
Yes.
reasons to be offended, or reasons to be
Yeah.
um martyrized or victimized, like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
nobody appreciates me. See, you just forget about me, and nobody, and really it's just her unhealed stuff coming
Yeah.
out. And it's
Yeah.
actually a good mirror for me because I have a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
Like, I think us sensitive, types can have a little bit of that shadow. Like, we are
Uh-huh.
looking for evidence that
Yeah.
we don't belong, or that we're not enough, or that people don't see us, or
Yeah.
whatever. And so we can hold we don't want to lose self-reflection. Like,
Yeah.
what is this part of my own stuff? Am I
Yeah.
filtering this through a lens of my own perception? And we're not robots, right? Like, we are impacted by other people's shitty behavior.
Yeah.
And so it's not just all about, oh, just let go, and oh, just move on, or don't let them get to you, or, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're not robots. We are allowed to be impacted by
Exactly.
people's yucky behavior. And
Mhm.
so it's a dance between, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we try to set the boundaries that we need to, and honor our triggers, even if they're from 60 years
Oh,
ago. And we're just learning about ancestral trauma, so these triggers might be
yes.
older than you, honey,
They
right?
are.
Older. These might be imprints from stuff you don't even know about.
Yeah.
And we just have to greet those with an open heart, greet those with compassion,
Yeah.
and try to find community that is reparative and healing and welcoming, and
Exactly.
has this room for paradox. I think a lot of communities are, and so we both come from this very rigid, you know right, wrong, you're either, you're sinful or whatever. But I also work with clients who come from very over permissive religious
Mm.
communities, right? That it's just like, just forgive everything, right? Like, if you go to the clergy and you're telling them that your husband is beating you, and they're like, well, we're all love here. We're all just
Yeah.
forgiveness here. Just turn the other cheek here. We just have to love him through it. And it's like, no,
No.
no, no,
No.
right? Like,
Yeah. Well, that. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can we can have compassion that is how his trauma is manifesting, and have very serious boundaries and accountability that behavior is
Yeah.
unacceptable.
No, and it's funny. It's like that's my stuff is so deep because like um I'm married to my husband 37 years, but he's my third husband. And I say that because the first two were horrible. And the first husband, I married twice. Okay. I thought we were soulmates. Okay. And of the two husbands, now the first one has died from alcoholism. The second one is the father of my children, and he's
Mhm.
still alive, and he's like 80 something. I have forgiven my first husband completely.
Mhm.
I am having a difficult time forgiving the second husband
Yeah.
because the abuse was different type of abuse. And
Yeah.
the first one, we won't go into it, take a whole other show. But there was just something that I really believe that we were supposed to be together. There was some kind of a, I don't know,
Yeah, soul connection.
soul
But
connection. Thank you.
he was
But
unhealed. Yeah.
how I forgave him was I said to myself, he was damaged, just like I was damaged. I know his story with his family of origin does not make what he did right,
Yeah.
but I understand it. And also, the things that he did when he did them, he had a sex addiction, and nobody talked about sex addiction
Sure.
because whenever it would happen, I did believe he was sorry, and I did
Yeah.
believe he loved me, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did give him another chance until I couldn't anymore,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know. But I could
And
forgive
I
him.
think that, and it sounds like he at least had the intention of repair, or the intention of apology. And maybe your second husband doesn't have that
Oh
same
no,
intention.
he was
Sure.
horrible.
Right.
Yeah, and he stalked
Yeah.
me for 2 years after I divorced him. So
Right. And we can
yeah,
still know, like, here's the thing. And I have a contentious relationship with the word forgiveness, because it was couched in this idea of turn the other cheek. it it was couched in this idea of, oh, just let go and let God. And you
Yeah.
know it was really missing the piece of accountability and the
Yeah.
piece of healthy boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are some, and the words that I like better than forgiveness is releasing resentment that makes me sick.
That
Um,
makes sense.
I
That
like
makes
that
sense.
better for me because forgiveness is
Yeah.
about it. Like to me, it's about, and I know that people have different definitions. So if you
Yeah,
have
it
a
is.
better relationship with forgiveness, that word is okay for you. Great, do your thing. But for me, the releasing resentment internally is really about me and about not letting it metastasize in my body.
Yeah.
And it's still very clear that his behavior, or whoever I feel his behavior is out of alignment, right, or is
Yeah.
harmful,
Yeah.
that is not okay. That behavior is not okay. And
Yeah.
I can still have this very clear boundary. Like that behavior was abusive. That behavior was not okay. I am never going to say that that behavior was okay because it wasn't. It
Yeah.
is harmful. It was harmful. And it will
Yeah.
continue to be harmful until he deals with his stuff. And actually, in that place, when I can have a very clear boundary, and then I can focus on releasing the resentment within, not relationally, because it won't be relationally. There are some repairs or resentment releasing that can't happen within the context of the relationship. It has to be internal because that other person is incapable of offering repair and accountability.
Oh,
And
yes. And
right.
that is so true with the second husband. Absolutely.
And so, but when I can have that very clear boundary that that behavior is abusive and unacceptable and it is not okay and it is harmful, and I can hold that behavior out in the distance, then
Mhm,
I
mhm.
can have a little bit of compassion for that person to say, I know this is what you're doing with your unhealed pain. I know that you're projecting, this is your trauma triangle working, and it's probably generational trauma for him that's decontextualized over time. And on good days, I can hold certain political figures in the same regard that this is,
Okay.
that this is unhealed pain, but that
Mhm.
still means that your behavior is held to account.
Exactly.
And that I can hold the compassion and the very clear boundary that your behavior is harmful.
Mhm.
And then I can do the work of releasing the resentment
Right.
so that I am free and clear of that it
Right.
is not a weight that I'm carrying around.
Right. Right. Yeah, I get that. So I talked about like I feel it in my gut, So what role do you think our nervous system plays in our healing?
Yeah. So I actually so a lot of spiritual practice will say something like, oh, pray or play, have a spiritual practice, and then it will heal. Right. And I'm like, oh, but what if we flipped that a little bit? And if you work on your nervous system,
Yes.
if you, if you work with your polyvagal nerve, if you bring in the body, if you bring in the somatic, that might actually open you up to a deeper connection with whatever spiritual practice you
For
have.
those who aren't familiar, explain polyvagal nerve. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
the nerve that runs from your brainstem to your gut is called the vagus nerve. And
Yes.
it connects. And so it makes sense just biologically that you feel things in your gut, Mimi, right?
Yes.
Because and people with trauma, there's a high correlation with things like irritable bowel syndrome, other digestive stuff, right? Autoimmune stuff.
Yep.
And the vagus nerve plays a role in digestion, in heart rate, in sugar. So diabetes is another high correlated thing with
Mhm.
trauma. And it doesn't connect to our frontal lobes.
No.
So you can think and you can know and you can
Yes.
like
Yeah.
know, oh, I gotta let this resentment go, or I gotta, I know that this old Catholic bullshit of us being sinful. I know that that's horse shit. I
But
can
you
know
don't
it,
feel it
but
in yeah.
it is
Yeah.
stored in such
Yes.
an imprinted way
I agree.
in our nervous system. And
Yeah.
so the vagus we just have to bring in the body, and whether that's
Yeah.
stretching or twisting, or there's certain polyvagal exercises that really are designed to stimulate the vagus nerve and strengthen it. And
Yeah.
it's really like, you can think of it like almost like a muscle, right? If you do that over time, you're going to create more capacity in your nervous system to be able to, have that observing quality. So a metaphor that a lot of people use is like, if your nervous system is the size of a espresso cup and a stressor comes in and that's like a tablespoon of salt, and you take a sip of it and you're like, oh, it's overwhelming, it's awful, it's just so salty, it's disgusting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your nervous system is the size of an ocean or a big freshwater lake, and you add that same tablespoon of salt in, you
Mm-hmm.
have much more spaciousness. You have much
Yeah.
more capacity to be able to observe and honor whatever the stressor is, and to
Yeah.
be able to say, like, oh, yep, that came in. I see that. I love you. It makes sense that you're angry. And you still have some capacity to be able to respond in a way that feels in alignment with your own wisdom and
Yeah.
not react.
Yes. Yes. And the thing is, you know, we're mostly talking about like religious stuff and everything, but there's other shame-based identities too. Like,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that. Like the gay community and what they went through. I mean,
Right.
growing up, some children, some people, I should say, they know very early on that they're gay or they're
Yeah.
bisexual
Right.
or transgender. In
Right.
fact, I had a nice woman do a transgender episode with me. She's lovely. Jennifer Marie, beautiful, beautiful.
Great.
And
Mm-hmm.
she knew when she was in grade school,
That's right.
she
Yeah.
was meant to be a woman. And people just, they don't get that.
Yeah.
They don't get that.
Yeah. And I think, I always think about that when we look at collective trauma like that, whether that be around people of color, around transgender, around the gay community, or around women, right?
Yeah,
Or around just anybody who has had systemic oppression, right? Systemic disenfranchisement. We are swimming in the soup of being told that we are less than somehow. And so even though we know better, that is still imprinted. And
exactly.
I think that shows up for cis het white dudes as well. Like there
Yeah,
is a big trauma of toxic masculinity and
yes.
of the father wound or the mother wound or whatever, collectively, of what it meant to be a man.
Yeah,
And that has,
yes.
created a
A lot.
distinct shame-based
Yeah,
identity as well. And
yeah.
so we can know that we're not bad, or we can know that we're not, that we're just allowed to be human. But that shame bound identity can be so imprinted in
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And so I think, that doesn't heal in the knowing, that doesn't heal in the cognitive, and
No,
it also doesn't heal in the individual level. That
yeah,
is a collective wounding that actually needs collective and communal healing.
yeah. And being a human being, our tendency is always to go to the brain. If there's
Right.
something, we think about it, we talk about it, we think about it. And no, nothing's gonna get, fixed there because like we're talking about, you need to go deeper, you need to go into inside, whether it's your heart or your gut or just opening up your whole space,
Right.
feeling. I am just learning still. I can't believe it. Like I'm going to be 77, and I'm still learning that I connect to a lot of different spiritual thoughts that I didn't
Yeah.
think I did. And like, reincarnation and having spirit guides and all these things. And I'm exploring it though. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
exploring it.
Yeah.
And that is healing for me
Right.
because as a young Catholic girl, if I talked about any of those
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
the
Like
nunsman
witchcraft.
got the ruler out and hit my knuckles.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows. Nobody knows. So this is what I love about our spiritual community, that everyone's welcome, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Black, whether you're gay, doesn't matter. And you don't have that most places. Even if
Yeah.
they want to say they're open, they're not.
Oh, a lot of churches now say like everyone is welcome, but it's still like a love the sinner, not the sin. We're still
Yeah.
going to try to make you not
Yeah.
gay or
Well,
whatever.
I love my minister always says that he thinks most of the New Testament was written by the women,
Hmm.
and the men took the credit for it, like
Interesting.
Mary
That's funny.
Magdalene. And
Yeah. Yeah.
oh yeah, he thinks she wrote most of it.
That's
But
funny.
it's true because it could be true because they didn't want women. Women were
Yeah.
never till
Right.
this day considered equal to a man. And we're
Yeah.
finding that I'm finding all that hard work I did in the 60s and 70s to get equality is being taken away.
Yep.
And
Yep.
my Black friends are finding out that things that they had are being taken away. And my minister, who was able to get married legally just a few years ago, was
Yep.
made legal in the state that they got married in. They want to take that away. And
Yeah.
that's scary to me.
Yeah,
That
it
would
is.
be
It is scary. And I think that if we can look at what is happening, and again, I want to be very mindful. I am a white, cisgendered lady that passes as straight. Like people wouldn't see me and go like, "Oh, she's definitely a lesbian," or what, or definitely queer
oh
or whatever,
no,
right? But then I have these other identities that are, queer. My identity as a woman is still one that is subjugated, right?
yeah,
um
mhm,
with various degrees of those identities giving me various systemic power, right?
mhm,
So I want to recognize that I'm coming from a pretty privileged place. I'm educated, I have a master's degree, I know how to access the system and navigate the system.
yeah,
I'm a middle class, whatever that means, but
yeah,
I have my basic needs met.
yeah,
And I live in a white body, and my lens from that. So I want to be very mindful of that
yes,
being a place of privilege. But I can, and I
yeah,
can also hold that from a spiritual perspective, what is happening right now on a collective level with rights being taken away and whatever, that is very brutal. And we must move to action to try to resist that wherever we can. And I also think that it is part of an upheaval, it is part of an excavation of ancestral trauma, spiritual trauma, white supremacy trauma
yeah.
that has not been dealt with in this
No,
country.
no,
And so, from a
it's
spiritual
been
lens,
swept
I
under the rug.
yeah, I actually think this is a necessary
Yeah,
dark night of the soul, that we are in this great reckoning and this
yeah,
great turning. And I do have hope
and
that
it
we will come out the other side
couldn't be
actually
painful.
more
Mhm.
inoculated
Yeah,
to this kind of thing. If these rights can be taken away so easily, then we need to do a better job of making these rights inalienable, right? That
exactly.
one dude can't just come and say,
He's going to
fuck
rewrite the Constitution.
yeah, like that needs to be more inoculated. And
Well,
I think we are in a
and what you're
political
talking about,
inoculation.
people are starting to get a little louder now and speak up because it's getting so ridiculous. But going back to my childhood, like I said, in the 50s, people use the N word. People would say different um, cultures, had all Polish people were dumb,
Yeah, right.
all Irish people were drunks, everybody, and this was allowed. Women were not allowed to vote. They weren't allowed to vote in the 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
They weren't allowed to get a credit card in their name.
I know. I know.
That's not that long ago. And
Nope.
so then talk about women, talk about blacks, gay. Oh, nobody admitted they were
Forget it.
gay.
Yeah.
It was
Transgender stuff.
hidden.
I mean, still, it's
Oh,
so, it's so
that wasn't
scary.
even thought about, but like
No.
just to
Uh,
admit
yeah.
all that stuff that the 60s and 70s was like this big revolution. And I noticed it then, and I always noticed it. It didn't go away.
Right.
People just weren't as blatant.
That's right. And it actually, in some ways, it's kind of like big T trauma. In the 60s, you could point to these laws and you could say, "Oh, you said the N-word," and that
Yeah,
is overt racism. And
yeah,
you could point to it and you could be
yeah,
tangible and you could like this is
yeah.
happening. Well, now it's much more nebulous and it's much more
Yes,
microaggression, and white people can be really nice and
yeah.
still racist as hell,
Well,
right?
that's it. Yeah.
And we
And
and I
locker room
I
talk
went
about
I
women and, all that. Like I said,
there's
didn't
some
go away.
nice
Yeah,
homophobia. There's
yeah.
nice people that still do not believe in equity. And
Oh,
so that is that really nice?
yeah.
But they're, fake nice, I guess. But there's lots of nice people. There's lots of quote unquote good people that are still part of causing harm.
Yeah. Well, my father was racist. He was an alcoholic and he was racist. He was adopted. So he knew his mother was Irish. So he hated the Irish. So now we have three things going on here, right? And I was growing up in that, being exposed to his ideas. Not that they were mine, but they weren't
Right.
nice. And my younger sister had a baby that was black and she was a drug addict. So my parents had to raise that baby,
Mm.
that black baby. This is like
Oh,
karma, even. And because of that, he was so in love with his grandson, you know,
wow.
and his thoughts and everything totally changed about that. And then it got to a point where I actually witnessed him. Someone told a joke that was disparaging of a black person, and he got angry and he called them out about it. Where,
Yeah.
years ago, he would have laughed with the,
Yeah. Right.
there's
Right.
a big
Yeah.
cosmic change, right?
Right.
Other thing was he died, and um, I was researching our history, and he always told us that the father that adopted him was his real father, and he was Sicilian. He adopted him when he was 4. And I used to think, if he had a son in the orphanage, why did he wait till he was 4?
Right.
His wife couldn't have children, but why did you wait till he was 4? That was a story. Well, it was a lie because I got the adoption records, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
his father was not who we thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
Then I did my DNA and it came and it said, your mother, mostly Italian, your father is 100% Irish.
Oh, wow.
100% Irish.
Yeah.
Now, I never had a problem with Irish or being part Irish, but I also never wanted to go to Ireland. Well, I want to go to Ireland.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
But
Totally.
it's just these
And
little things in life
really,
that,
that has I love how that folds into, and let's be honest, there's some overlay here between white Christian Puritan religion and
uh-huh.
and racism and patriarchy, and there's some intersectionality here
Oh, God, we could
between
do a whole show on that.
spiritual abuse and racism and patriarchy and anti-queerness.
Oh,
And
yeah.
until church as a collective starts to have some accountability about the harm that they have caused the gay community, the black community, just women in general, I
Yeah.
do think the numbers will continue to go down, because it really is this case
Yeah.
of, we're just gonna like la la la, we like gay people now, we like women now, we think women should have we should have we should have
While they're
credit cards now.
stabbing them in the back.
But they're
Yeah.
not really taking collective reparative accountability for what has happened
They're
on a
doing
collective
the
level.
opposite. They're doing the opposite. They're trying to hurt us again and minimalize us again and marginalize us and take us down. I mean, God forbid that a woman, never mind a black woman, became president. You
Right.
know,
And again using scripture to
yeah,
justify that,
yeah.
weaponizing that. So this goes back very old. Spiritual wounding can go very old and very deep, and sometimes it's older than us, right? It's older than we were all sort of robbed of
Yeah.
a spirituality that was more connected to the earth, that was more connected to equity, that was more connected to our
Soul.
inherent
Yeah.
lovability.
Hmm.
And so decolonizing that
Mm.
is part of what we are doing. And that
Yeah.
is a spiritual practice, but it's
Yeah.
like it's also a somatic practice, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's the body working with the spirit, working with the heart, and really it's all I think I can
Collective
see a big
healing.
picture. We
Yeah.
don't know what that looks like, but
No,
it's emergent.
no.
It's
It's a
emergent.
collective healing which could take decades. I
Yep.
mean, or centuries, and
Yep.
has been, but
Yep.
you know, um, it's deep. It's so deep
And all
in
we can do is just greet what's here in our bodies with love,
our
and
own
to
life.
try to point our feet in the direction of wisdom, of beauty, not glamour, but beauty. Like, I don't know if you know John O'Donohue. He's a poet and a Celtic mystic. We should check him
Oh,
out. I love John
I will,
O'Donohue. But
John O'Donnell.
yeah, he talks about beauty as just goodness, right? As the divine, as kindness, as nature. And what if we just point our feet in the direction of wisdom, of compassion, of collective healing,
It's
of
true.
repairing, of connectivity, of unity? But that still means that we dig into our shadow, right? And that's where the
Yes,
wisdom
there.
comes in.
Yeah, we have a dark side. It might not be as dark as it was. I know mine isn't, but I can delve into it if I allow it.
Definitely, absolutely. And that's what, you said, oh, 70 plus and I'm still
Yeah.
learning. I'm like, honey,
Oh yeah, we're
this is
still
about
learning.
this is
Still
my book,
believing.
my book
Oh
title
yes,
is
show
like
your book. Always
never
enough.
done.
Yeah,
Always
never
enough,
done.
never done. And it's an emergence. And we're continuously growing, continuously changing.
I thought
Um,
about your book the other day. This is so funny. I was having a bad day and I said, I feel overwhelmed and underloved. It was sort of a play on your title. Like,
yeah, totally.
and then um, I looked outside and there was a duck outside. And I said, boy, she's sitting there a long time. They never sit that long. They're walking around, they go in the water, they're in that. She was sitting there and sitting there. About 2 hours went by. And I walked by and I went, oh my God, she was hatching her chicks.
Oh,
Here, I
so
have pictures on Facebook of the 6 little babies. I said, now that is what people should be focusing on.
yeah,
Nature, what's a
yeah,
miracles of life. And I believe this. I really believe this, Eric, that that was meant for me that day.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
was a sign from the universe that was meant for me. And it did. It felt like such a gift that I
yeah.
witnessed that.
Right. And I really think our spiritual practice is to honor the brutality, to have one foot here in our humanity, right?
Yeah,
To honor what it means to be in a human experience, and to still have part of us rooted in the divine, right?
yeah.
Rooted in that surrender practice, rooted in that life.
Mhm.
Life is just lifing, right? Life is lifing
Yes.
through us. And that we are sort of in that dance between our humanity and our divinity. And
Yeah.
we can't have one without the other. We need both. And
Yeah.
so to honor the brutality and the beauty together in the same breath, that is what we are being called to do. Not to just say positive vibes only and
Yeah.
gaslight or whatever, and to not also say like, oh, the world is effed, we're all screwed,
Yeah. No,
just
no,
nothing
don't do that.
matters anyway. um
I was the first time that person ran for office and things are going on. And I'd be watching the news and I'd be going like this. My head would be going like this. Think about that.
yeah,
So my lovely minister in red, he said to me, no, no, don't do that. When you're watching, go like this. Like, this is what's happening. I am
yeah,
going to, take it in and I am going to deal with it in my own way. And I am going to know that things will change. And
yeah,
this is what's happening right now. But he said, when you are always shaking your head, no, that's negativity. Don't
Sure.
do negativity. Just little,
Yeah.
everybody's not like us. Like, and I understand they're worried about feeding their children and different things, and they don't have time to think about how spiritual they are, polyvagal and all that stuff. But that's why I do this podcast.
Yeah.
That's why I do
Yeah.
the YouTube show.
Yeah.
I've been getting pretty popular, and people have actually, said that they love that I'm doing this because
Yeah. Good.
it's information that's getting out that doesn't normally get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am so thrilled you came today. We had a couple
Yeah.
glitches that I'll take care of in the
Oh,
editing.
but that's life, right? Like
It's live, and
it
there's so
happens.
much more I wanted to talk about too. So we'll have to do something
Well, we'll
again.
do a third. We'll do a third.
Oh yeah, I'll have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I will. I know I'll have you then because you're one of my most popular speakers.
Well, I'm honored and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and just yeah, thanks for having me on and yeah, if people want to check out the website, check out my book, I have some coaching packages on sale for the month
Make sure
and
you
I
send
can
me
extend those
everything.
to
Yeah,
your listeners. I'll just honor that for
yes.
whenever this
And
airs.
send me an email with everything and I'll have it all on the show notes. And we'll
Okay.
talk soon, I'm sure. Have a lovely day. Love you.
Yes, you too. And seriously, good vibes for your upcoming stuff.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I take them and I am grateful.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
sweetheart.
All right. Thanks, Mimi.